Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. So today, by popular demand, we're going to have a look at the seasons of the Witch Oracles. So if you remember, Rockpool has started publishing this series a couple of years ago, I believe, with Samhain. And then they published Eula, and then they published Beltane, I think sometime last year. And this year we got the Mabon. So the Mabon basically is going to be released worldwide around the end of June, July, depending on where you live. For example, I know that in Australia it's going to be released in August. But because I went to the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival here in Sydney a couple of days ago, and there was the Rockpool stand, and I had the opportunity to actually purchase the Mabon Oracle and another couple of oracles that are still not released by Rockpool. And I'll make sure to link up the video that I've taken over there with all the stalls and stuff, and just to show you the tarot and oracle haul that I had the opportunity to have when I was down there at the expo. Now, I believe that there's been a bit of a shift. So I was talking with the guys at Rockpool and they confirmed that. But let's have a look at the cards first, because I know that there's not a lot of people that had the opportunity to purchase this deck, and even less had the opportunity to show it on camera, on YouTube or on Instagram. So let's have a look at the cards. So what I've heard about this deck is that, first of all, you will notice there's a slight change in the artwork, and that's because the illustrator of this deck is Tihana Lukovic, as opposed to Jada Rose. Jada Rose was the illustrator for the three decks that came before this, so she illustrated the Samhain, the Eula and the Beltane Oracle. There was this change that is, I have to say though, the artwork is not that dissimilar. It actually feels like you can see it as a normal, natural progression from the three preceding oracles into this one. The rest of the production, when it comes to the value, when it comes to the two-part box, and you know, the foil of the stamping on the top of the box and the sides, everything is very similar. Everything looks like it's being kept in the same kind of with the same kind of settings. It's 44 cards. The color that they've chosen for the gilding and the gold foiling here is orange, which, if you ask me, it's a burnt kind of orange, and you can see that from the backs as well. And it actually is I think it's a choice for you know, Mabon, because Mabon is obviously referred to autumn, you know, in the middle of autumn, and it's kind of that season where in many countries you start eventually to see those burnt oranges in the leaves, for example, of the trees, and in many other recurring, let's say, colors that we see. There might also be some fruits, you know, that remind of that color that came out in season. But let's have a look. So we've got, as usual, a really good size guidebook. And there's always a bit of an introduction. It talks about the season in specific. So we got here the content, so the introduction, Mabon themes and areas of focus. And then we've got a couple of spreads, and then we talk about the cards. Now, what I do like is to see that what we talk about is, you know, something that is always refer to a kind of a witchery theme. So it's always something that will bring you back to your witch practice if you so inclined, if you're interested in that. But the most important thing is that all of these oracles bring us back to a stronger connection with nature, because nature is the one thing that is actually really marking the pass of time, isn't it? And so the nature with the seasons is something that humans always have to deal with. We always have to adapt. Even with technology, in many cases, we have been able to cultivate and, you know, to harvest several crops that were not even supposed to be harvested in that season, but because of technology we could get to that. However, there's a limit to what humans can do, because nature ultimately has the last word. So what I really like about all of these oracles is the fact that there is this invitation to get back to nature. There is this invitation to get back to something that we know because it's in our own essence. So human beings are part of nature. No matter how much we actually detached ourselves from it. So this is one of the main things that I really like and I find consistent in all of these decks. How to use the cards, mini messages. That is another thing that actually changed. You will notice that in all Samhain, Yule and Beltane, at the bottom of the cards we used to have small poems or poem-like sentences and messages, whereas this time there is a conscious change about that. They have taken a step back from that practice, and they have probably listened to the tarot community. I was actually kind of relieved to see that many of you chose to answer my comments in the video that I posted before this one, where I was saying that as a non-English native, I find it hard sometimes to understand the messages, for example, especially from the Samhain Oracle, because they're not straightforward to me, so I have to kind of read them a couple of times in order to be able to understand what the meaning is. And unfortunately that acted as a deterrent to me, because in some cases I felt like I was lifted off from the reading. I was lifted away from the meaning of the cards because I struggled to make sense of the messages. A lot of people answered sharing my concern, and I think that that is kind of common to the comments that I heard in the more vast tarot community when it comes to the messages at the bottom of the cards, or any kind of oracle in specific. What does feel to this demand is for very concise and communicative keywords. And I am happy to say that I had a look, so I started working with this yesterday night and it really blew me away. It's a really gorgeous oracle deck, not just the artwork, and I'll show you the choice of colors, but what I really love is the fact that it does have that really strong autumn or fall kind of feel. At first look, I saw a couple of cards and I found them a bit confrontational, but I have to tell you the truth. Whilst working with it, they actually found their own meaning. They found their own correct place. So I really do believe that everything that is in here has its own place, and it's its own rightful place. Even the confrontational cards, which I only expected in the Samhain Oracle, to be honest. So let's have a look more in details when it comes to the cards themselves. The production value is the same, so you'll have the same type of, as you can see, catching the light. So it's a bit of a glossy, it's not super gloss, it's not the mystical moment kind of glossy card, but they wanted to be consistent throughout the whole publication of all these oracles. And therefore, since they started with the Samhain with this type of gloss cardstock, they had to, stay with that. And I appreciate that, because perhaps one day I might actually want to work with these 4 or 5 or 6 or however many they're going to publish oracle all together in one big stack, although it might be impossible to shuffle in that case. So let's have a look. This is a flip through. I'm not gonna go too much into details, so I'm not gonna call it a walkthrough, because what I really want to focus today is showing you the way in which I actually use these oracle decks in what I call a seasonal spread, or a cyclic kind of spread. But first, let me show you the cards. So we've got the Apothecary Cabinet, just to give you an idea. Whereas before there would have been a poem-like message at the bottom of the card, now we've got, without practice, without befriending them, they are strangers in your path. It's still a message, it's, a complex sentence, but you will find that the meaning of it is actually a lot easier to access and to and to attune to. So I really appreciate that. So Apple of my eye, You can definitely tell that the artwork is slightly different, although it does still evoke those feelings of autumn that I really, really enjoy. The other decks do that too, whenever they're referring to Samhain, Yule, etc. But this is doing that in a kind of a different, slightly different kind of way. Some cards do tend to stick together, unfortunately, because of the gilding. So the gilding is this kind of inconsistency with the other decks. It's still a glossy kind of gilding, but it's an orange one. I have to say I'm quite happy because it's rather, I reckon it's okay. Whereas I recently have received a deck, it's the African Gods and Goddesses, which has a this kind of glossy gilding on the edges, and unfortunately it came that it was completely chipped off. And it's a new deck, so obviously it's a defect of the production that might happen with this kind of gilding. Cranberries. I love cranberries. So we were talking about fruit. I really like the idea that by suggesting, you know, the images in this card, they take you back. They really take you back to that kind of very specific, very special atmosphere that is typical of autumn days, no matter where you live, because obviously we all live in different parts of the world. We have a different kind of way to live autumn, because obviously well, I live in Australia, for example. Autumn is not as cold as it used to be when I used to live in the Netherlands. So obviously autumn in the Netherlands, sometimes we actually have snow, even in autumn, not just in winter, sometimes in spring as well. In Australia, where I live, does not snow ever. This is one of the cards that I was talking about the other day that I find a little bit confrontational, but this card is exceptionally powerful. So it's the card of grieving. The chambers of your mourning are surrounded by nothingness, emptiness waiting to be seen. This is a card that is actually conducive of shadow work, and to be honest with you, I was a bit taken aback by that card, because I really thought that you know, Samhain would have been the best time of the year to have this kind of a confrontational cards, you know, and work with shadow work and everything. But I actually do appreciate it, because this deck is very, very balanced, which I cannot necessarily say about Samhain. This deck will definitely have that autumn feel, because autumn is not winter yet, and it's not the darkest part of autumn, is it? So when we have Samhain in the northern hemisphere on the 31st of October, obviously it is still autumn officially, but it's that part of autumn where everything starts to get really, really dark. It's not the end of September kind of autumn. So this deck, because it represents the equinox, it will give you the idea of merry, also joyful things. For example, made in wine, your presence embodied, tasting the pleasure flowing through your being. This is absolutely a card that resonates a lot with me, because when I was little, my father used to have a grapevine, and we used to make wine. So to me, this is definitely recalling those joyful and also a little bit, you know, drunk, probably, let's say tipsy moments. Not that I was drinking when I was little, but that kind of atmosphere that was very common in those times. Molasses, mountain cabin, peppers, for sure. When autumn is the time in which you always make all the jars, you're filling jars with you know, chutney and marmalade and jelly stuff, pomegranate. So as you will see, there's a lot of recalling of these elements that are typical of that season: pumpkin spice and apple cider. This is something that I briefly was in the US for 3 months, you know, from the last bit of summer into autumn, and I love the fact that when it's pumpkin spice season, you know, the pumpkin spice latte is something that everyone really looks forward to. And it does represent something. It's like a marker. It's like something you look forward to. Queen of the Dead, Reaper. And so we've got, as I said, we do have that kind of balance. We have the harvesting season, but we also have the Reaper season. By the way, so sorry about the noises in the background. As always, even though it is Saturday, so I'm filming this on the Saturday to post it on the Monday, we still have a lot of renovation works going on, and I've decided that there's nothing I can do about it. And even so a couple of weeks ago, I actually kind of very humbly went there and asked them, you know, could you please let me know what time you're going to be done, and then I'm just going to you know, start filming afterwards. And they were kind of upset that I actually asked that, even though I didn't think that it was anything outrageous. But so I'm not they're doing their thing, I'm doing my thing. That's it. Whiskey. Life should be sipped slowly with intention. Be patient as the vision reveals itself. That's really beautiful. That's a beautiful card. I really like it. So Witch's Gathering. So this deck has got 44 cards. So Witch's Rosary. That's beautiful. Craft your skills with intentions repeated. A practice of magic powered by purpose. As you can tell, this to me, I have no struggle at all in understanding the meaning of this sentence. I have no struggle in relating it to the image on the card. It keeps me in the reading, so it doesn't lift me off. I really appreciate that. I think they've done a fantastic job. Whoa. You are woven with an embrace, protected, loved, and the familiarity of finally being home. That's such a beautiful message. I love it. I'm a knitter as well. So I really, really resonate with all of these cards. So this was the Mabon, but let's have a look at how I work and which tarot deck I actually use to pair up with these oracle decks. So let's start with Samhain because it was the first one that was published. I pair up Samhain with the Murder of Crows Tarot by Corrado Roy. By the way, I know that you guys always point out that I give you the news, so I'm like a kind of a gazette of the tarot publications. Now, Corrado Roy is currently working on another tarot deck. It's called the Joker Tarot, and it looks, I only saw a couple of cards, but it looks absolutely incredible, and it looks very much like a bit of a return to the kind of style and artwork that he used for the Murder of Crows, and it will be on Kickstarter hopefully soon. There's no timeline yet, but I actually subscribe to the newsletter, and so every now and then we do receive notifications about how the campaign is going, although it hasn't launched as an official campaign yet. But he is working on the cards, and there will be two options, one with black and white like the Murder of Crows, and one with color, and also a mini one, I believe. But let's have a look at how I pair these two up. So as you can see, I use it in a very traditional, very popular way, where I split the tarot deck in two. I put it on the side of the oracle deck, and I use, and that's the way in which I related this reading, by using the oracle deck as a center of the meaning of the message, so focusing on the actual message the cards want to communicate me. And I also look into the cards on the sides by looking into the messages and the meanings of the cards themselves as referred to the traditional RWS or whatever other system the tarot deck is based on. We all know that the Murder of Crows is based on the traditional RWS, even though the symbology sometimes might not be there. For example, we have this 8 of Cups, in which it's not necessarily what we would expect to see. even though it still brings us back to the idea of taking a step back and moving away from a situation of conflict, a situation where everything has come to the end of the cycle, and now it needs to be either make it or break it, and most of the time the Eight of Cups signifies the leaving the situation behind. So what I do, I normally look at, because what we were saying before, the message at the bottom of the card of the Samhain and the other two oracles before they changed that in the Mabon, has a bit of a structure of a poem, a short poem. In that case, I actually focus only on the keywords. When I pull a card just from the oracle deck, I will eventually read the message, but if it's used in the center between two tarot cards, is actually not very helpful that way. So I just focus on the keywords, potions and spells, you know, between the High Priestess and the Eight of Cups. Pumpkin between the Queen of Pentacles and the Nine of Pentacles. I really like the idea that there is that kind of resonance and echoes between the artwork of the two decks. Even the way in which the faces of the characters in the card are depicted, are painted. They have a very narrow face, you know, with a pointy chin, and we can definitely find the same type of depiction, the same type of artwork in the tarot cards as well. The color palette in many cases is also, I think it works well between the two, because the it's a voluntary choice that the color palette on the Samhain Oracle is kind of muted. It's back to that sort of 2 or 3 main colors that we have. Obviously the Murder of Crows is even more muted, because as you can see, it's black and white and shades of gray, even though I have to say it's a very well done kind of color palette, in the sense that it's not your chalk white, it's a kind of a dirty kind of white, and there's a lot of gray utilized to gain depth in the cards. So I do this reading in such a way that, you know, it just creates those bridges between the cards, whether it's the oracle card or the tarot cards. There's always this kind of intuitive tools that we have at our disposal whenever we read. Sometimes I read according to directionality. As you can see, these 4 characters are all looking towards this card, which is the Ace of Swords. So perhaps they're actually telling me this is a 5 of Swords, so the gaslighting that has been going on in the 5 of Swords, he's telling me, and even more so the introspection that comes in from the underworld card in the Oracle is telling me to go back to this project, to rethinking everything that has been the journey that I have embarked upon, the journey of the mind that I have started for myself, and a step away from the conflict of the 5, and try and use the introspection of coming to reasons with whatever it is that we have deep within ourselves, and start again with a new commit and a new kind of project. So I really like the way these 2 decks work together. I have to say that it wasn't easy to find a deck that would pair up well with the Samhain, but on the other hand, it also wasn't easy to find an oracle deck that would pair up well with the Murder of Crows. And when I saw these 2 together, I actually thought that they were kind of made for each other, in the sense that it really does feel like there is this complementing of the cards. Obviously the Murder of Crows has that kind of really strong sense of darkness, of shadow, that we see in the Samhain Oracle as well. So this is the way in which when I use just the Samhain Oracle instead of all 3, or in this case now 4 seasons of the Witch Oracles together, when I use it on its own, this is the way I use it. So the more traditional way in which I put the oracle in the center and the tarot cards on the sides. But let's have a look at the other oracle decks and the tarot decks I pair them with. And then at the end, I will show you one spread that I call it the continuity spread, because it utilizes the 4 oracles from the Seasons of the Witch. And based on the messages from the oracle, then I pull tarot cards to give me an idea of this continuity of the seasonality of our lives, of the cycles of our lives. So this is the Eula, and I use this deck with the Symbolic Tarot, Symbolic Soul Tarot by Elisa Seisinger, published also by Los Carabeo. I like using these 2 decks together because it gives me, this combination gives me the feeling of Yule, basically. So you've got the celebration that to me comes out of, in the tarot, it comes out of the gold stamping on the cards. And when we look at the oracle, there's many things that actually point to that kind of atmosphere typical of Yule. So you've seen it from the use of the color palette, the themes of the cards themselves, the keywords. You know, there is this very strong importance given to the ceremonial part of Yule. So Yule is not just merriment, but it still reminds us to be attuned to the seasons, to the way in which nature actually evolves in that particular time of the year, and the way in which humans have always tried to, you know, keep up and catch up with nature whenever there were these changes. Now, traditionally, obviously, Yule is used to be a really tough time for humans because it's very cold, and you know, when humanity was born, there was absolutely no way to resist the rigor of winter. So it's really nice to actually notice how in many cases we'll have those kind of correspondences in the tarot cards as well. So it's the way in which humans sometimes still have to refer to the sometimes brutality of winter. And let me tell you, even now, I remember I was in Scotland one winter, and it was so cold that even with the heater on, the pipes, the water pipes actually froze. And whenever we started, we wanted to have hot water, we had to be very careful, because obviously there were the water that was in them was frozen, and it was obstructing the flow, and so we had to be very careful because they could have exploded, and you don't want to do that because it's extremely expensive to have to replace the whole piping system, obviously. But humans have to go through winter. There is that a strong sense of celebration in winter. Why? Because we know, ironically, humans tend to celebrate when they reach the worst time, the most difficult time, the toughest time. Why? Because they know that they touched rock bottom, and then the only direction after that is up. So the fact that we celebrate in the middle of winter is, on the one hand, to also bring back some joy after, you know, a season of rigors and coldness and darkness as well, because there's no light, or there's little light in winter. But it brings back the idea that nature is doing this cycle, is going through the motion, and after that there will be celebration, there will be merriment. Well, there you go, the 4 of Wands and merriment. Although it brings back the 10 of Wands, and perhaps there's a little bit too much of a celebration and merriment. I really like pairing these 2 decks together. I feel like even though perhaps the color palette is not exactly the same, but we still do see a lot of echoes and resonances in the artwork, for example. But most of all because, as I said, they both express that idea of going through the worst and hoping, you know, that nature would turn around and start going towards the best of the cycle. when it comes to Beltane, I actually really like pairing it with the Forager's Daughter Tarot, and that's because to me Beltane is all about fertility. It's all about growth. It's all about tuning into yourself, investing in yourself, taking care of yourself. So it's all about nourishment, sometimes also indulgement. And it's, when referred back to nature, is in the moment in time in which everything is flourishing, everything is blossoming. There's a lot of birth, there's a lot of creation, there's a lot of really, really powerful energies going on in this time of the year. And I felt like a tarot deck that was actually reflecting that in the cards is definitely the Forager's Daughter Tarot. Another tarot that I thought about using is also the Jonas, the 7th edition. So I'm going to show you first how these two work together, and then we're just gonna have a look on a preview, because I've actually thought about it just this morning, and I've actually tried that combination before. So we're just gonna have a look at how they look together. So I have to say these two decks work really well together. I have been using them before. As I said before, Beltane is that time of the year in which, ironically for me, is a time of the year in which you can actually feel the pressure of having to attune yourself more than in other seasons, in the sense that there's a lot of nature actually counts on natural beings, and therefore even human beings, to go to the completion of the cycle. So if we were left with that sense of darkness that started with Samhain and went into Yule as well, Beltane is the time of the year in which we're supposed to really use our own power, our own energy, to get out of that darkness and accomplish something. So Beltane brings a lot of goals, the goals that you can find in nature. There has to be reproduction, there has to be not harvesting, but the moment of in which everything is flourishing, in order then to go to the harvesting season that is represented by autumn, at the beginning of autumn. That's why it's very nice that the next deck is indeed Mabon. There's a lot of coming together in this season. There's a lot of community. Everything has a purpose. There's no time for introspection. That's how I feel that there's a lot more pressure, let's say. But what I really like is the fact that together with the Forager's Daughter, this oracle deck almost feels like there is some kind of softness to it, something that is not necessarily felt when you use it on its own. So what started as something very strong, very powerful, almost like the light of the sun, which is very strong to behold, is actually kind of softened when used together with this. And that's the reason why I actually really like this pairing, because I feel like there's still this sense of attunement to nature, because obviously the Forager's Daughter, on top of everything, the Forager's Daughter also, you know, it reminds you that of that strong and powerful link with nature, but in a way is a more complete and balanced kind of deck, because it is a tarot deck. So obviously it has to have all of the energies, not just the reproductive energy into itself. And this way it brings back a little bit of balance to an oracle deck that is, it seems to be all about the bees and the honey. And if you know what I mean, it's something that can be exhausting at a certain point. But when used with measure, when used and balanced in such a way that the Forager's Daughter actually does, you can actually enjoy this time of the year. And it's a time of the year in which we are definitely recommended, we're definitely asked to take care of ourselves, to embrace our own nature, and to let it do its course, you know, to let it do whatever it does best. So as promised, I'm just going to show you and also see for myself, because I never tried this combo before, how the Forager's Daughter, the Jonas 7th edition, which is the latest one, pair up with the Beltane Oracle of the Seasons of the Witches. I thought about this combo because of the colors, because when I used the my JJ7 I call it, I felt this strong feeling of life that coming out of it, this strong feeling of also fertility, if you want, because there's a lot of echoes and resonances with fertility. And the color palette felt like it was going to go really well. It was going to pair up really well. The fact that obviously the JJ7 is heavily based on nature and in specific on flowers. And we do have this sense of flowering and blossoming in the Beltane Oracle too, because that's precisely what the season is about. It's about blossoming, it's about you know, self-nourishment, but it's about that self-nourishment also bringing to the blossoming of oneself. And I feel like these two actually really do pair up well together. I really like these combinations. In some cases there's some echoes, you know, there's a crown of flowers here, there's a crown of flowers there. I feel like they really pair up well. It might be a good idea to look at how they actually read together. I'm not going to do it today because I've only prepared the spread by using the Forager's Daughter, but I'm liking this combo more and more in each and every card. So this is the JJ7, and I think it goes really well with the Beltane as well. But let's have a look at Mabon. So as soon as I saw the color palette and the artwork on Mabon, I immediately thought of the Gentle Tarot. I felt like these two would actually have a really good conversation. Let's have a look, but I do feel like even the images that have been chosen for the box actually do resonate with each other. Okay, so as I said, I immediately thought of the Gentle Tarot when I saw the Mabon, because the color palettes, I do believe that they go really well together, even though they might not necessarily be exactly the same. But there is this kind of resonance that we can see, there's echoes. It's a more complete color palette, and I'm saying complete as opposed to the other three decks when I talk about the Mabon, because the other three have, apart from the Beltane, I feel that they have a specifically chosen muted color palette, whereas in this case the tones are still very much alike to the burnt orange of the gilding. So in a way it is muted as well, or, you know, limited. But there is, because of the artwork having much smaller details in some of the cards, we can actually see some kind of shading and different colors as well. But I feel like there's a lot going on between these two decks when you read them together. There's very much of a conversation. So Mabon is supposed to be the completion of that cycle that we've seen before. So it starts in the dead of winter, in which, you know, we celebrate because we know that the sun is going to come back soon. And then with Beltane, we know that we have to do our job basically and reproduce and procreate and flourish and blossom, in order to be able then in autumn to harvest. So there's a sense of accomplishment, I believe, in Mabon, because if you've done your job and if you've done it well, so you will be able to reap the fruits of your hard work. And that's exactly what this deck is telling you. And I do believe that there's a lot of benefits in reading them together, because the Gentle Tarot is a very powerful earth-based tarot. It gives you that bridge, it gives you that strong link with Mother Earth and nature, seen as something that is beyond everything else, stronger than everything else. And I really like the fact that in this deck there are humans as well as animals, because it does give you the idea that humans are part of nature, which is exactly what all of these oracle decks, the Seasons of the Witch oracles, are telling you. Basically, they are assigning to human beings their important role into the cycles of nature. And that brings me to the reason why basically I'm filming this video. So basically I created a spread. I call it the continuity spread, because to me the most important thing is to notice that nature is always moving on. Nature is never stopping. So there is continuity in every single act of nature, even though in many cases it may feel and look like there is an ending. Be assured that endings in nature are always they have that duality of a beginning as well in their essence. But let's have a look at the spread. So the way in which I created this spread was by going through the essence of each and every one of these oracles, and starting from Samhain, going into Yule, and then from Yule proceeded into Beltane, and you know, for me obviously the last one being Mabon, but whenever they will release other seasons of the Witch oracles, that will definitely integrate the new seasons into the new Sabbath into the spread. For now we have 4. And I've only started this spread yesterday because I felt like even though you can still use only these 3, I feel like there's no completion unless you get to the point in which you actually harvest what you've been nourishing. So I call it the continuity spread because, as I was mentioning before, I really do believe that everything is part of a cycle in nature. Even though when things sometimes can actually look very bleak, they can look like there is absolutely no light at the end of the tunnel. If you believe in nature, and nature, let me tell you, it's the only thing that is still there. It's the only thing that is still continuing to live and live through everything, because humans can be wiped out by a pandemic, but nature will still be there. Even though, of course, we know that it can take a lot of hits, but what we see is that there's always life springing out of death. So nature has this divine power, you know, define death, define the end of a cycle in order to start with a different one, a new one. So the continuity spread, basically it starts with we start with Samhain at the top. So Samhain for me is the position of your message from the ancestors. Samhain is the time of the year in which the veil is thinning and you can actually have a conversation with your ancestors, the ones that are not with us anymore. And it's very important that we have this kind of conversation and receive the message from the ancestors with a lot of intention, because it's one time of the year in which we really need to focus on that. So by choosing a card from Samhain, I will be channeled, I will be shown the direction in which I have to focus on, in which I have to you know, try and find a way to progress forward, because that's not cool. That's not forget, this is called the continuity spread. So there's a lot of motion. I feel that one very important thing is that life goes on. This sentence may sound a bit cruel perhaps at times, and personally I also felt that way whenever I was faced with the ending, with an ending. Knowing that life goes on, though, should be seen as a glimmer of hope. Even at the darkest time, life goes on. Even when there is no life, life will spring up again. So the Samhain position, as I said, is the message from your ancestors, and it's something that you need to focus on. Then we will proceed into the Yule position. So the Yule position is what you need to celebrate. We need to celebrate in Yule. Why? Because ever since the ancient times, ever since the primordial times, people had to find a way to maybe give a nudge to the sun in order to tell it, hey, by the way, you need to come back at a certain point, okay? So we do this worshipping of the sun in the middle of winter because, first of all, it's an expression of hope, and it's continuity because we believe that the sun has come back and will come back like every year it does. But it's also because human beings cannot just stay there and, you know, and just do nothing. We feel that whenever we're going through something really harsh, we somehow need to do something in order to be able to feel in control. And this way of reconnecting to nature, ironically celebrating sun at the moment of the year in which the sun is practically not there. If you lived in the northern hemisphere and the northern countries of Europe, I can assure you, being above the Arctic Circle, in winter there's no sun, there's absolutely no hours of light. So if you go to Iceland, if you go to the Svalbard islands, for example, you will see that there is a little bit of light coming in at 1 p.m. and then by 2:30 it's gone. So obviously when we miss something the most, we feel like we need to call out for it. And that's what we need to focus on. What do we need to celebrate? Because Yule is the time to celebrate, but also the time in which we have to express our hope for something that we miss to come back. And then we look at the Beltane position. The Beltane position is, what do we need to blossom? What do we need to nourish in order for it to blossom, to come to the flourishing, the part of the cycle in which after the endings and after the call for hope and for the sun to come back, we arrive to the moment in which everything is fertile, the bees are producing the honey. So Beltane is that position. It tells you, it shows you what you need to focus on in order to produce something, in order to create something, in order to fulfill your destiny as that cog in the nature, in the natural kingdom, as something that produces something. And then obviously we arrive at the time in which we have to, whatever we have created, whatever we have produced, we need to harvest it. Okay, it's not it's not enough to just realize what we need to do. We also need to put it in practice. We need to use it. We need to create that kind of perpetuity, create that kind of link in the continuity cycle. Because obviously, as you may have guessed, because it's called the continuity spread, you will see that after harvesting something, we feel like we have lost something. We have done everything that we were supposed to do. And there's that kind of sadness that takes humans every time we have finished something, every time we have completed a project, every time we reach, you know, we put the last dot after the words, the end. So that's where we have to start again to receive the message, to focus on the message from the ancestors, to see what we need to focus on, and so on and so forth. But let's have a look in practice at how these work together. So I'm just gonna, these have been pre-shuffled, but I'm just gonna shuffle again on camera, and then we're gonna pick a card. So I don't have room to fan out the deck, so I'm just gonna pick a card like this. Let's go for this one. Well, there you go. Okay, so crystals and herbs. Oh, what medicine, what sacredness to behold, a dash of healing straight from mother's home. This is kind of resonating a lot for me, because lately I have been looking a lot more into a natural way of healing myself. There's been a lot of, not necessarily problems or issues, but there's been a lot of call to and attention to my body to just look inward and try and understand why certain troubles, certain issues, certain pains were coming to the surface. And so I live in a country where traditional medicine is obviously the mainstream. There's not a lot of attention to alternative medicine, even though you can find it and it is absolutely legal. It's not like it's something that you cannot access to. but it's also something that, let me tell you, it's not necessarily easy to access, in the sense that it tends to be quite expensive. And there's not a lot of networking around this, so you may eventually be able to find someone, but you don't have that kind of support from the Medicare. We call it Medicare in Australia. Obviously there'll be different names in different countries, but I remember when I used to live in the Netherlands, it was absolutely it was considered as integrative part of traditional Western medicine. So for example, if you had a medical insurance, you could eventually use it to offset the cost of alternative kind of healing. Whereas in here you have to select certain very specific kind of insurances that will let you have that. And let me tell you, they are so expensive. We're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars per year. At the end of the day, you really have to be able to do a selection, because you cannot, it's either one thing or the other. You cannot spend thousands and thousands of dollars on an insurance that does not provide you benefits when it comes to alternative medicine. Anyway, long story short, because I don't want to delve too much into that, I have been looking into, trying to get back to nature and looking into herbs and crystals. And it's something that I don't know much about yet, especially when it comes to essential oils. I really want to look into that. I have bought a couple of books, I've bought a couple of decks, and I'm really into it. I really like it, but obviously it's not enough. I need to also start practicing. But this is the message that is coming from my ancestors, which I can assure you, my ancestors, and I don't even need to go that far, talking about not my mom, I wouldn't know, but her sister, my auntie, she was very much into nature. And I'm guessing their mother as well. So this is something that my ancestors are telling me to do. Look at your pain and try and find a way to heal it, but looking into traditional ways to do that. So when it comes to Eula, as I said, I'm just gonna shuffle again. Okay. So as I've done before, I'm just gonna pick a card. Doesn't want to come out. Maybe it's not a card that I should look into. Mother Mary. Okay. There's this sense of the celebration that this is inviting me to. This position, as I said before, is the card that tells us, is the position that tells us what we need to celebrate, what we need to call back into our lives. Now, if you follow my channel, you'll know that I'm not religious. I'm a very spiritual person. The way in which I read this card as Mother Mary, for me, is actually the essence of mothering. So I need to look back into what it means to be a mothering person, a nurturing person. To me, what comes to mind is the Queen of Pentacles, because that's the way in which I look at the archetype of the healer. I need to celebrate the healing. This card, what is telling me, and I know what the message is that I have had to change my career recently, and it was a good thing, even though at the beginning it didn't feel like it, because I'm actually focusing a lot more on helping people, on becoming the kind of healer that I've always felt that I've been and I was, but I didn't necessarily have the time to focus on. When life was so hectic that I didn't even have time to heal myself, let alone starting to think about healing the others. So this is what I need to recall. Don't forget that we celebrate something to give it a nudge, to remind them to come back to us. So this is what the message is for this card. Now let's have a look at Beltane, which is what we need to harvest. What I need to create. pick this one here. Goddess. Amazing. This is, I think it's very consistent with this message. So learn how to heal myself, and also focus on what I can do to become what I'm actually supposed to be, and actually, you know, going into the continuity spread, into the natural evolution of the continuity spread, looking into achieving this level of goddess. To be honest with you, every time that I feel or that I read this message about becoming a goddess, I'm always very shy, in the sense that I don't necessarily see myself as a goddess, but I do understand the message. I believe that in the sense that every single one of us is a god or a goddess whenever we look at our own possibilities and realize them. So create something with what we have, we do become a god, in the sense that when we see God as the creator, then obviously a goddess is also the creatrix, or the creative power, feminine power of the universe. So obviously this message is even more confirmed to me. I need to be able to feel that I need to be at that level and create something, and in staying in the theme of these messages is something that is related to nourishing, to healing. And let's have a look at what I need to harvest, which is the Mabon Oracle. Okay. Okay, let's see with this one. Coven. Well, that's interesting. I am you and you are me. When we come together, we are all we seek. That's a very beautiful message. That's a very beautiful message. Perhaps this is an invitation to harvest this healing that needs to be done within the community. It needs to be done by taking charge of the couple of things that I'm actually skilled at, becoming a mastering these skills, and then finding my role, finding my seat at the coven, and be part, accepting that we are not an island. None of us is an island, but we are all part of a community, and it's a community of healers, as you can see, because it's not just a community, but it's a coven. So it's obviously looking into the powers of the members of the community. Now this is, as I said, this is the continuity spread. What I generally do, I don't have much room now, unfortunately, and this is becoming a very long video, but what I generally do, I actually pull a couple of tarot cards to be set at the sides. So there will be 2 cards here, a couple of cards here, a couple of cards here, and a couple of cards here, just to see where, you know, in a practical term, in a practical way, the oracle card is asking me to realize, to manifest the message that it's giving me. So this is it for today, and thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. So I hope you enjoyed them. Let me know in the comments below. As you know, I always love to read your comments and to answer. It's part of my practice. It's part of the reason why I am here on YouTube, and I can assure you, sometimes when I put a comment on someone else's video and I don't receive an answer for maybe weeks, and I think to myself, what is even the point? You know, why are you even there? Because you can do your practice on your own at home, but once you're actually filming it and you're putting it out there into the world, to me, the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to get in touch with the world. So I will always make sure to answer all of your messages, and I always appreciate them. So thank you so much when you actually take the time to put a like on the video and to comment on that. I really appreciate that. So more to come. Have a great day.